OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Happy Canada Day. Free agent frenzy here on TSN. Bryan Hayes, Jamie Noodles, McLennan, Jason Strudwick with us. Buddy Chris Johnston coming up a little bit later in the hour. Little Strutter dud off the fly later in the hour as well. Best bets coming up. Brad Treliving was speaking with the media today, and he said no update on Marner. We don't have to play that, but effectively he was asked, where are we at with Marner? No update. Not sure what that means necessarily. Is that no update on a trade, on a signing? I don't think they're going to trade him. I think he's going to be here. I think he's going to play. I think the question more has to do with whether or not they're going to sign him to an extension.
Right.
That's the bigger question. For me right now, I could be wrong on that. But Nick Robertson, he snuck in there on the radar yesterday where I guess he and his camp, it was reported, have asked the Leafs for a change of scenery. Nick Robertson would like to be moved.
I mean, what's he worth on the market? A draft pick?
Yeah, probably not much. He does score when he plays. Like, he is capable of scoring, and that's what he was in junior. That's what he was with the American junior team. It's a different administration. Dubas is the one that drafted him. I guess Keefe was kind of a part of bringing him up, although I don't think Sheldon Keefe was his biggest fan. I don't know if Craig Berube is going to be his biggest fan.
Right.
But he's an RFA. He's a young kid. He has no arb rights. He has no power. He has not established himself as an NHLer. Here's what Brad Treliving had to say earlier this afternoon when asked about that Robertson request.
Nick's an excellent young player, and I'm not gonna get into play-by-plays of I haven't seen the reports. I've heard. Certainly, I obviously have known that there was some frustration with Nick on his behalf, but we look at Nick as an excellent player, and there's great opportunity for Nick here, and we need him to be a good player for us.
So basically, thanks for coming out, but we'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll control the situation.
Yeah, in other words, we'll let you know.
Yeah, you want to play hockey, you're going to play him for us until we let you know outside of that.
Right.
That's the way I see it.
Notice, I've never have done this, but if I'm him, you know what I do? I say, hey, can I talk to the new coach? Can I say, hey, can I have a sit down just like Marner and Craig had that nice little buffet or coffee at the place? Say, what
Press
do I need
conference.
to do?
Yeah.
What do I need to do? Tell me, how do I need to play? Tell me what I can do. I'm sure that Berube's watched all the tape on all the players, is familiar with his game. What do I need to do? If you're not going to get traded, if there's not a desire on the team to do that, just ask and then try to come in and perform that. Because everyone, I always felt when a new coach came in, it was scary because you didn't know how you're going to be used, especially a guy who was maybe middle to the bottom of the lineup. So there's an opportunity here for him to create a new identity for himself within this group, but he needs to know what he needs to do. So I would request that. I think any coach would take that, Noodles.
I think so too, but I would have done that before I asked for a trade. Like, that's the other thing.
Well,
because I know he might have done that. But I don't know if it never helps anybody to lead with that.
Yeah,
like to go, hey, you know what? Not playing here. I want another opportunity somewhere else. Because it's awkward if they don't trade you. You're like, you got to show up at camp and you got to get a contract signed. Like, to me, you got to find, okay, am I a fit? I think that's where that conversation comes, where Robertson Camp calls and says, listen, are we part of the future? If we are, then how do we fit? And that's where the conversation with Craig Berube and his staff comes in. And if you're like, oh, you got to make the team, you got to do all these things, well, maybe it's better. But I always find the guys who are asking for a trade, like, those are the tweeners. They're not the solid.
That's what he is.
Right,
I think,
tweener.
yes, and he needs to prove he can stay in the league. I think you guys would know this from experience and from being around it. Just because you scored a bunch of goals in junior doesn't guarantee you're going to be given that opportunity in the pros. Right. Or that you can do it in the pros. And I know per game he's actually put up numbers. He looks like he's a guy that can score goals. I believe that he has that ability. But he's not going to be a 50-goal scorer in this league, in my opinion.
Right.
So what else can you bring to the Leafs that are of value to them or anybody else?
Right.
But that's where I go back to what I said. Like, if you doesn't need, like, look at that team. They have guys that can score goals. But what does my game look like when I'm not scoring? Right? What does that have to be? And I think that's the hard part.
Yes.
Just to sort, like, because maybe he doesn't know, or he doesn't want to do it, or he can't do it. And you have to figure out which one that is, because it's when you don't have the puck that is as or more important than when you do have it for a guy like him.
I hate it when, like, his game is speed. He's got a good shot.
Yep.
Like, he's got to play to his potential. The worst thing he can do is try and do something that he's not capable of doing. And it would be awful. Like, Struddy, I don't know if you ever had a teammate where it's like a guy's going through a tough stretch and they go out and want to fight and they just get their ass handed to them. And it's embarrassing because the whole team's like, what the hell's he doing fighting? You know, just took the wind out of this. Like, I don't want Nick Robertson to try and play like Craig Berube next year to try and impress him. It's not going to happen. Like, you got to play to your strengths. So Craig Berube's not going to say, you need to run people over. He's not a big guy. But can you compete hard for pucks? Can you block shots? Can you do some of the things that every player at critical situations are asked to do? That's where I would try and get some clarification if I was Nick Robertson.
That makes a lot of sense.
But I've never seen a coach not ask a forward to track down pucks. That's, to me, I never understood when I see forwards not forecheck. I'm like, what are you doing? That's the most basic. Even if you don't hit the D-man, track the pucks down. I don't get it.
Yeah. So the Leafs, again, we'll see what happens with Robertson, but they were active today. Chris Tanev, he signed 6 years, $4.5 million. Oliver Ekman-Larsson on a 4-year deal at $3.5 million per. Anthony Stolarz is here with Joseph Woll. That's your tandem now. Stolarz on a 2-year deal. Yanni Hakanpää. He's signed for $1.5 million over 2 years. So they've made moves. They brought Domi back. They brought Liljegren back. Joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline, here's our TSN hockey insider, Chris Johnston. CJ, what do you make of the moves that the Maple Leafs have made so far?
I think they've done some good business, to be honest. I mean, obviously, a lot of holes to fill, and weren't able necessarily to get all their top targets. We know they like Nikita Zadorov, but he was going to come in at a price tag that was just beyond what they could accommodate and still make the other moves they wanted to make. But Hakanpää is a big body. That blue line with Tanev now, and also Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think it's getting closer to being the kind of blue line that Brad Treliving can feel good about. I know that was one area last year where just wasn't exactly what he had in mind, and I think there's some changes there. I mean, the Domi number is reasonable. Stolarz, and I'm certainly no goalie expert, but seems like a reasonable guy to have as a tandem mate to Joseph Woll. And so, look, the Leafs are hamstrung to some degree, as they are every year, by the salary cap. They don't necessarily have as much money as other teams to go out there in the market. But given some of those constraints, I think they feel that they've gotten better, and I still think there are some moves to come.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's begin with the guys that returned here. Them bringing Domi back, and then Bertuzzi. It sounded as if they were still kicking tires on him. He ends up going to Chicago. He got a pretty good deal there in terms of term and money. Max Domi returns. Timothy Liljegren returns. What was the thought process on those two in terms of where the Leafs stood?
Well, for Liljegren's standpoint, he's a right shot defenseman. What the Leafs were nervous about is if they, just gave him his qualifying offer, there's the possibility they could have went to arbitration. And when you do that, you don't control what the contract is, right? You're leaving it up to an arbitrator. It can also be a difficult process between a team and a player. And so I think that, by getting him signed to the deal they did, it's cost certainty in a sense. They know what he's going to be paid. And, let's see, I'm not saying he's definitely going to be traded or anything by that, matter, but, they've brought in Hakanpää and Tanev who play the right side too. And so, maybe the remodeling could still include a Liljegren trade. It's something I know that they did explore. And so, we'll have to see where that one ends up. But I think the reason to get that deal done is it just removes the possibility of arbitration. And they've got a number attached to him now. As for Domi, the fit was really good. Very popular guy in the dressing room. Had a pretty good run at the end of the season playing alongside Austin Matthews. So that's an option for them. I do think the Leafs are in the market for another forward, perhaps one that can play left wing. And so, if they're not able to sign one, you got Domi as an option at left wing. Obviously, he played, a bunch of center last year too. And so he brings flexibility. Obviously loves the market. You saw his social media. We all know who his dad is. We saw the way he played in the playoffs. I mean, I think he ticks a lot of boxes. And, when they were able to get him under $4 million, that became a deal that both sides could live with. I think it was a long grind of a negotiation, but one when they got to the finish line yesterday that they each felt good about.
You just mentioned on the left side, before you came on, Nick Robertson was the topic of conversation. What do you make of his, unofficial or official requests? And, is he a fit? Do you think he's a fit on that left side, or do they find a marketplace for him and try and maybe sign somebody to fill maybe a little bit more experienced guy there?
Well, I mean, clearly Nick's frustrated, and I think we can understand, why some of those frustrations might be there. He scratched in Game 7 this year. Some of the fewest minutes among the forwards that played regularly in the lineup last season, other than Ryan Reeves. And despite that, put up some pretty good goal totals and scores most of his goals at even strength with the Leafs having so many high-end forwards. There's not a lot of power play minutes out there for a guy like Robertson. So, he wants a fresh start. Let's see how it goes. The Leafs aren't certainly going to make a trade just for trade's sake. I think that they'll maybe give this some time to breathe and see, is there anything that could make sense out there for him? And if not, really Nick Robertson is going to have a decision at some point. Does he want to sit out? I mean, how determined is he to really force his way out of here? I mean, it's one thing. A lot of players over the years ask for a trade, doesn't always materialize. And so, I certainly don't think, the Leafs probably would prefer this not to be playing out publicly at all, but, it didn't take them by surprise, the report last night that I put out there on Robertson. And it's just it's a frustrated player. So, I don't know where it's all going to end up. I do know the Leafs view Robertson as someone that could be quite useful to them next year because whatever his contract is, and he's a restricted free agent, they don't have a deal with him, but, he's not going to be signing for mega bucks. And with his shot and with some of the growth we've seen in his game, I don't think it's implausible to think that he could maybe be, say, a second-line winger option for them. And so, the Leafs think the opportunity that Nick Robertson feels he hasn't gotten is actually going to be, in the offing this year. And so, maybe there's a way when all is said and done that they can make that work. And if not, then obviously they will take calls on him. But, he's probably worth more to them in the lineup right now than he is on the trade market because he still is not a proven player. He's not even at 100 career NHL games yet. And so, I don't really know how the dynamic's going to go right now. I mean, you could imagine probably not the nicest environment between everyone. But as I said, this does happen in other markets, in other situations, and players do sometimes keep playing here. So we might still see Robertson in Leafs blue and white next year, even with this news.
CJ, with all due respect to the other partners that Morgan Rielly have had, it feels like Tanev is the guy that is going to really stabilize that top unit. Then everyone hopefully slots in properly behind him. So, Rielly, how does this addition of Tanev, assuming he's able to stay, healthy, how's that going to affect his game and that top pairing for the Leafs?
Oh, it's massive. I actually don't think, Struddy, we can overstate that aspect of it because, Morgan Rielly has had an absolute ton of partners. Since really he's been on the Leafs top pairing, obviously his first couple of years in the league, he was slotted a little lower on that blue line, but you go back over the years, he's played with Phaneuf, he played with Ron Hainsey, he's had Ilya Lyubushkin beside him a couple of times. I mean, it's been a whole range of different guys, but, none of it, as you mentioned, with respect to all those players and the others that I haven't, called out by name, he hasn't had someone who's such a pure defender as this. And, I think it's going to free Morgan Rielly up to a certain degree to do what he does best with the, a bit more of a security blanket, beside him, where, he can maybe jump into the rush or be thinking a little bit more on the offensive side of the puck, but know that, in instances where there might be a breakdown or something doesn't, the play doesn't get completed as well, that he's got Tanev there to help bail him out. And so, I think this is more of the, I think the Leafs have been missing this. We've seen, obviously there's a time when TJ Brodie first came to Toronto, especially, he had some really good seasons beside Rielly. I think filling a similar kind of role. I just think Tanev, does it on another level. And so the only question, of course, with Chris Tanev is just age and injury status. What you love about the guy is his willingness to sacrifice his body, block shots, throw checks, things of that nature. But, as a result of that, he has been injured over the years. But, assuming that you're going to get a healthy and productive Chris Tanev, I think it's going to be a big boost to the Leafs top pairing there. And it obviously allows them to slot other players in behind them in roles that they're best effective at. So I don't see any way you would look at this blue line as it currently looks and think it's not an improvement. And, it all starts with being able to slot Tanev in at the top pairing on the right side.
With Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider, it's an arms race in this division in the Atlantic. And you look at Boston, they got Zadorov and Lindholm. Like, those are two good players. Lindholm's a really good center. It was kind of a weird fit at times in Vancouver, but he's a smart player. He's a versatile player. He can put up points. I think he fits really well up the middle of the ice. You know, like a poor man's Bergeron, kind of. Like, that's kind of the way I would describe him. And Zadorov's there. We know Florida's going to be active. Tampa's been active. Like, how do the teams not named Toronto, Florida, Boston, Tampa, how do they catch up here? And are any of them close? Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, Montreal?
I'd say Detroit, to me, looks like the closest. Now, a lot went right for them this season. They came within a point or two of qualifying for the playoffs. So, you know, I don't know if they can replicate everything that happened, but, you know, I do think their team looks the most poised. And you know, it's a question they're all wrestling with. You know, this is a tough day, and I think it's been a tough period in Buffalo. You're starting to see a lot of pointed questions asked to Kevin Adams. I'm not sure he could get done quite as much as he would have wanted in this window. You know, I mean, similarly in Ottawa, they managed to offload Jacob Chikrin's deal today and bring in Nick Jensen, maybe bring a little more balance to their defensive pairings. With Jensen being a right shot, they had an overload on the left side with you know, Shabbat and Sanderson already signed there. So that, you know, I think the writing was on the wall that Chychrun, you know, 1 year up from UFA, was not going to have a long-term future in Ottawa. But, you know, those teams, it's hard to say they got markedly better on a day like this, and they're trying to play catch-up anyway. I mean, obviously, Ottawa feels good about their deal to get Allmark to solidify, they hope, their goaltending. You know, you're still banking on some internal growth with the young players they have in their forward groups. But, you know, the Atlantic is certainly much stronger from top to bottom than the Metropolitan. So if you're in the Eastern Conference, it is a challenge. And you know, I don't see any reason to predict a fallback for Florida, Boston. You know, Tampa is going to be interesting. I don't know. You know, on paper, I understand that the Gensel for Stamkos swap, so to speak. You know, you lose Sergachev in the process. You bring in J.J. Moser. You brought back McDonough already. I mean, I really admire Julian Brisebois' conviction and you know, his you know, basically decisiveness to go out and get those deals done. But you know, there's going to be some kind of lasting hole, I would think, with Stamkos leaving. I mean, very popular teammate, obviously face of the franchise type of guy, scored 40 goals last year. Now they hope Gensel can do the same, especially, you know, getting power play reps alongside, you know, the Kucherovs and Points and Hedmans of the world. But you know, the division's not getting any worse. And so the challenge is there for those teams that haven't been there. And I just don't, at this point, there's still lots of offseason left, so maybe there's some trades that'll make me change my thinking. But I think it's going to be very tough for Montreal, Ottawa, Detroit, and Buffalo to usurp the top four teams in the Atlantic.
CJ, what do you make of how, I was calling it ruthless, Tampa was with just allowing Stamkos to leave? I mean, you know, there's a bigger picture situation there. It's not just allowing a guy to walk. I mean, this is their face, this is their captain. He's been a legacy.
They sent
guy.
a tweet out last hour. You see, hey, thanks, Stammer, for everything. Just getting roasted.
Did they quote tweet his, put a thumbs up on there? Or like,
no,
I don't know.
Like, there, 2 cups and 1,000 games. Thanks for everything. People are just blasting them online.
What do you make of it, CJ?
Well, they're probably one of 2 teams in the league that would do it, right? The others being Vegas. It's not quite the same thing, but Jonathan Marchessault's an original player at the team, just had his best season, won the Conn Smythe when they won the trophy 2 years ago, and you know, they negotiated hard with him right down to yesterday and ultimately let him leave. You know, Tampa's done this over the years with other legacy type of guys, the you know, Killorn, Palat, Tyler Johnson, I mean, guys that were there, but none of those guys are Stamkos. I mean, Stamkos changed everything for Tampa when they won the right to draft him first overall. You know, he was a superstar, maybe a tough first season in the league. It took him maybe half a year before he found his stride. But, you know, by his second, third year, this guy's a 60-goal guy back when no one was doing that. You know, a Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame person. He's been to 4 Stanley Cups since he's been the captain. And as I say, even into his almost mid-30s, he scored 40 goals and 80 points last year. I mean, this doesn't happen in the league, right? You know, Kane and Taves and Malkin and Crosby, you know, all those guys that won cups and kind of lived up to their billing as top of the draft guys, Ovechkin, like they all got a chance to stay into their late 30s. with the teams, or I guess mid-30s in Kane's case. But this is unusual. I think it was somewhat predictable, or I always knew it was possible, I guess, because of the way Julien Brisebois has always been quick to act. But I think they're going to feel that one. I think there's a PR aspect. I think, as I say, an interpersonal aspect, that some damage that can be left behind for teammates in Tampa. And I love the fact that Predators, when announcing the signing officially, said "Steven Stamkos" on their tweet, because that, if you remember, was the original tagline that was bandied about Tampa back in the day. And so I think it's going to be fascinating for the league. Maybe the Predators all of a sudden, with this day and the fact they had a little better year than most expected last season, and maybe this is I think this is pretty compelling for the league. And I know Steven Stamkos is pretty excited. Luke Shannon's good buddy there in Nashville, traded some messages with him today. I mean, this is not a typical NHL move. We see it more in the NBA where stars bounce around. But I think it's something that we'll all be tuned into pretty closely next season.
Pretty targeted last 10 days by the Devils. They bring in 2 big D-men and a massive goalie. Is this obviously they felt was their need, and do you like what they did?
I do. They look at their team the way Florida did a couple years ago, where it's not just about scoring goals. They feel like they have to change the way they play to a certain degree. I think a little bit more trying to lean into some physicality with the Blue Liners that they've signed, a little more rugged type of play. I mean, that they make some trades and obviously solidify the net with Jacob Markstrom. But bringing in a Pesce and a Dillon, I mean, I think that the way New Jersey's operating is like they're not messing around right now. They're a team that expects to win starting next year. And I know they missed the playoffs this last season. Some of that was due to poor defensive play, injuries they had. Didn't have Dougie Hamilton for most of the year. They had lost some defensemen last year in free agency. So I like the way the Devils are behaving. And I think Sheldon Keefe, familiar face for Leafs fans, is stepping into a pretty good situation there with a lot of high-end forward talents, and now rounding out some of maybe guys that can help them on the defensive side of the puck and in the crease. And so I think the Devils, for me, are right now, no question, they're back to being a playoff team. They probably would have been with no changes, but I like the series of moves they've made, going back the last week or two with the trade for Markstrom.
Yeah, I agree with that. CJ, I know it's been a busy day, busy couple of months, busy season for that matter. So we appreciate you doing this. Have a great summer, buddy. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks, guys. I hope you all hit the golf ball straight this summer, because I know I won't be.
That is the plan. That is the plan.
Deep.
Thanks,
buddy.
Hey, boys.
There's Chris Johnston joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Maple Toyota is the place to be. And check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander, in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com. Yeah, Jersey, I think Sheldon Keefe's a pretty happy guy. Yeah. Like he should be. You bring Pesce in there. Brendan Dillon, I believe, came in. You have Markstrom. You already have a bunch of offensive weaponry to begin with.
Yeah.
Top 50 Dougie. Doug Hamilton's going to return and be healthy.
That's like adding a great player.
Yeah.
Because him coming back from injury, like Hamilton's a player. And you add.
And now you got a tandem in net that's like grown adult professionals.
Yes, Markstrom and Allen. Like that's one of the better tandems in the league. So that's what they were missing last year. I don't know how many times you talk to the guys out of there or talk to the coaches. You're like, we just need a save. You can't judge how your team is if you can't get a save, because you can figure out the deficiencies if there's some consistency. They had no consistency there. They were asking too much of their young kids. So you get Jake Allen at the deadline, you get Jacob Markstrom now. Like, they'll be fine in net. I think they'll be in good shape moving forward. They might be the most improved team, just either from internally and some of the moves they made in the last 2 weeks, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's really like adding 3 defensemen, right? Because Hamilton was out so much in the D. So this will change their back end a lot. I would like to see them tweak their top 6, a little bit more size. And it's length, it's size. You're leaning on other players. Look at some of the people they have to play against within their own division and in that Eastern Conference. Some pretty big players. So can they get to the net when it gets heavy, maybe past the first, second round, guys?
Well, and one of those guys they've had to go up against is Jacob Trouba, and you talk about ruthless. Like, there's reports the Rangers are trying to move on him, and he no longer has a full no move. I guess now he's a modified no trade.
15 teams.
15 teams, and he's handed them into Chris Drury and the Rangers. He might get moved.
Yeah.
And it's not to the same extent as Stamkos, because he hasn't had the same success. He wasn't drafted there.
Right.
But he did get traded there, signed long-term. He's their captain, and New York has basically turned on him because they can't make sense of the money, and guys have moved ahead of him. Like Fox ahead of him, Miller's ahead of him.
Yeah. I mean, they got Liljegren, they got Schneider. Their D's good.
But that's, again, ruthless,
but it's
New
business.
York's doing it.
It's business. Like, you don't feel bad for him. In essence, he signed the deal there. I mean, things have pivoted. Obviously, there's one play that people circle. That was that 2-on-1 goal where he pinched up the wall, and it was an ugly look. It was Struddy, and where was that? In
the Spangler Cup?
No, it wasn't in the Spangler Cup. It was in
hockey.
St. John's. It was Struddy in St. John's where Jim Roberts had to yell at you because you were going north and the play was going south. So that's, for me, I think it's ruthless, but I would also, if the Rangers were able to make him, if they ate some of his money, I'd put up my hand to have him on my team too.
I do too, man. I do too. And I don't think it's a huge commitment. It's like 2 years.
He plays for keeps.
Yeah, he
plays
does.
for keeps.
Yeah.
But think about this, guys. If I remember correctly, when he told Winnipeg he wanted to get traded, he told them where he wanted to go. That was New York. Mm-hmm. So now, they don't want you. Like, that's the business, right? It's not that anyone deserves this, but it happens. He did it to another organization. Now they're looking to happen to him, and it's unfortunate. It's not fun. But you're right. I think there's this place for Tuba on a team that wants a heavy, hard defender. But at eight sheets, that's pretty pricey.
Pretty rich. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And maybe the Rangers eat some of that money. Again, Shesterkin's up after next year, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So, like, this time next year, we have the chance for one of the craziest days. If Shesterkin gets there, if Sid gets there, if Draisaitl gets there, if Marner gets there, if Rantanen gets there.
Yeah.
Like, that's superstars,
That's a Jerry's,
man.
though. Like,
how many of those? Let's come back and discuss.
Yeah, we can discuss
where we think we're going to be a year from now. Okay, the likelihood of any of them, multiple, all of them possibly being here, or we're talking about them changing teams this time next year. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Free agent frenzy today, NHL and NBA. Jason Tatum agreed to a 5-year, $314 million extension in Boston.
Isn't that great? Like, honest to
monster. That's the biggest deal in NBA history.
That's
like $130 million a day.
Yeah.
Oh, 130,000. Sorry.
Yeah, it's over $60 million a year. $60 million.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. Well, and he just won a championship, and Jaylen Brown, I think, signed for like $303 or something. Klay Thompson on his way to Dallas, which is a pretty interesting move, and Paul George on his way to Philly, which I think Raptor fans are going to find amusing because Kawhi left Toronto to go join Paul George in L.A., and now George has left Kawhi in L.A. to go join Nick Nurse in Philly.
Yeah.
So now you got Embiid, you got Maxey, who they signed to an extension, and you got Paul George. So if you're the Raptors, again, it's not going to be easy in your division moving forward. So yeah, that's kind of what's been going on in the NBA. As for the Blue Jays, they lost. They lost again today. Lost yesterday. They took 2 of 4 against the Yankees. I'm not sure if that's. In fact, I know it's not worth anything. But once you get through a day like today, it's like, all right, hockey's going to kind of slow down. The NBA is going to slow down. Go time.
Yeah.
Come on, Blue Jays. Where are we at? And where are we at? We're 8 games under 500. It's a mess.
You're watching and you're like, okay. It was weird. They either blew the Yankees out or got their ass handed to them. There was no in between.
Weird series.
So
Vladdy's been great, which again, it doesn't mean anything, but good for him. He has been red hot.
Is he at 14 dingers or 13 now?
I believe he's up to. I thought he had 2 over the weekend. I think he's up to 14, at least 13 for sure.
It was 13. He might have got one. I missed a game in there, but he's at least looking like somewhat of the player. Like, I don't know what he's on pace for now. That like
he's at
26.
13. He's at 13, and they're at the halfway point. Yeah, I mean, he'd be on mid-20s if he keeps at the pace he's been over the last month. He might hit 30 plus,
which would be nice.
Which is great, but they're 8 games out of a wild card spot. Like it's over. We're into July. This is the trade deadline today for the NHL, or not for the NHL. It's free agency today in the NHL, NBA. Trade deadline for Major League Baseball in like 30 days. Something's going to give here. They've got to reload. They've got to turn things over. This time next year, though, we have the potential for probably the craziest NHL free agent frenzy you could think of.
Yep.
If Sid gets there, if Draisaitl gets there, if Marner gets there, if Rantanen gets there,
Man.
I guess Shesterkin would be a UFA as of next year.
Yeah, there's some others that we're not paying attention to that are kind of hiding in the weeds. We'd have to get like a full list. But, I mean, those are some of the marquee players.
How many of those do you think make it? How many of those are we talking about?
One of them's making it for sure. I don't know who that is. I'm not going to guess. But I think one of them will go, I'm playing it out, and I'm going to see what this looks like. And then it comes back to the argument, what we were talking about off air, Hayes, was, are these guys better off waiting or signing in season? Because it looks like in season you're getting more money.
Yeah, that's
Really?
it, exactly. Nylander and Pettersson, Struddy, like they played their cards beautifully. Like there's, at a minimum, let's say Nylander signed yesterday.
Right.
Like right before the deadline on an 8-year deal. It's not for any more money than they gave him in January.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have gotten $12 million yesterday. If anything, it would have scaled back where they would have said, you know what, the temperature in the city's not great right now. It didn't work out well for us. You didn't finish with 120 points.
Right.
Maybe it's 11.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 10-7-5. The same thing with Pettersson after the playoffs he just had. You think he's getting 11.6?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think so. I mean, it's easy. Hindsight is 20/20, but
you could argue. Yeah, go ahead, Strud.
Well, I worked backwards. I did the process backwards. So Shesterkin, New York Rangers. I found that Russians love playing in Florida, but there are 2 goalies there already that aren't going anywhere.
who are Russian.
Who are Russian. So my theory seems to hold water.
Yep.
So I believe that he will re-sign with the Rangers, and I think that'll get it done. And then you look at Rantanen. Why would you leave Colorado? Great place to play. He's got a great buddy there. I think for Leon, I don't know if this will happen, but it's the great unknown is Connor McDavid. What is Connor McDavid going to do next year? So if you're Leon, do you commit? Do you not commit without knowing? I think 1-year extension makes a lot of sense. Now, will it happen? That's a whole other question. But I think it makes sense for both him and Connor to come out at the same time. They can make their choice together. So that leaves Sid and Marner. Sidney Crosby, I think he just lets it run out and makes a decision. Doesn't mean he's not a Penguin or not. So that leaves one guy, one person.
You got Mitch. Mitch is your
Marner.
guy.
Sir
Mitch is
Mitchell
your one
Marner.
guy.
I think that, if they can't get it done, maybe they think we're going to move him out and free up because that cap space will be freed up. Obviously, the talent is high.
Yep.
And then Tavares is nice. So by the process of elimination, Mitchell Marner is the guy I think that's maybe on the outside looking in at that time. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I could see. I mean, I think that 1-year deal for Draisaitl has not really been discussed a lot here, Struddy. I'm sure everything's been discussed in Edmonton, but that makes sense to me. He matches up with McDavid. And then they basically, maybe they play a game of chicken. Are you staying? Am I staying? Are you both? Because it feels like to me, I can't picture a world where only one of them stays. Like I feel like they're both there long term, or both of them are like, we've tried, we've been here for a decade, we're both going to move on.
I mean,
that's the way I see it.
I feel
just because how close they are and how linked they are.
I think they feel like they're close and they want to do it together. And keep in mind, is the grass greener on the other side?
No, not always.
If say Draisaitl goes to L.A. and he doesn't have the Philip Deneau's passing him the puck, and hey, you can get a little. But Draisaitl's, I don't think it's a money play. It's either a lifestyle or a winning play. Mm-hmm. And if you can get, you'd like both. But, Draisaitl's from Germany. He didn't grow up in the Bahamas or on Hawaii or something. Like, it's a guy that he probably is acclimated to Edmonton. McDavid, we know where he grew up. We know that, listen, Toronto, he's a GTA. We'll call it a GTA. Is he GTA?
Yeah.
North
Newmarket's a GTA.
Okay,
so you'll squeeze him in there no matter where he's from.
Yeah,
he was from Thunder Bay.
Yeah, he's from Thunder Bay.
Yeah,
he's still
guy.
GTA.
Yeah. But
Toronto
like, it's
guy.
just, I think I've always felt, and I could be completely wrong, I've always felt that those guys want to win as long as they believe they can in Edmonton.
Yep.
And then all bets are off.
Which is fair.
But
that is fair.
Yeah, that's totally
fair.
fair. And I think the market, I mean, you can speak to it, Struddy. I think I can speak to Toronto. If the Leafs won a cup and Matthews, Marner, Nylander, they all came and said we want out, people would be like, we wish that weren't true.
Right.
We wish you'd stay. Like, obviously, you want them to stay. You'd like to think dynasty. We just went through it with Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
You want them to stay. But if you give them one, I can accept
like
it.
It was softer with Kawhi.
It was
softer.
Weird. It sucked.
Weird.
Like, I don't know if enough was made of how awful that was that he left. Like 2 weeks later, he's like, that was great, but I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Which really sucked. That said, you were bracing for it because you kind of understood it was a 1 year thing.
Right.
Like, you kind of knew when they acquired him. But it was softer because they won.
Right.
And the same thing would happen in Edmonton and Toronto.
It does. But you got to look at this. When you're talking about that level of player, how can Leon commit to 8 years or whatever it is, an extended contract, not knowing what the best player in the league is going to do, right? Those level, you look at some of the guys that signed today. If they weren't sure, if he weren't sure, if Lindholm wasn't sure that, Marchand and Pastrnak could be there in 2 years, does he go and sign for that long there? Like, they want to win. They want to play with good players. They want to be in a winning team. Same with DeBrusk out in Vancouver. He's got two really good centers that hopefully he's going to play with, right? Those guys are going to be there. So that's why I keep going back to the 1 year deal. Say, hey, buddy, here's whatever, $13 million for $14 million. We'll get it. Then you can both make the decision at the same time.
Right.
I know that's maybe not ideal, but at least then they know. Because I'd want to know. It's unfair to ask 97 what he's doing 2 years away from it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, is it fair? You think it's fair?
Right.
But if I'm Dressel, I don't care about fair. I have to ask you. Like, we're best friends. They're on a bachelor party right now.
Well, they're best buddies.
I'm buckled asking him, are you staying or what?
I heard Draisaitl is. Didn't you have a place in Muskoka or something?
Yes. They're here training all the time in Muskoka.
They're very tight. Like, we joke, but we're all close. We talk about things behind the scenes all the time. You can't tell me that they're not sitting at the back of the plane when they're 2-9-1 at start the season going, what the hell's going on? Or vice versa, going, they're on the plane home from Florida going, we can smell it. Like,
we're close.
We're close. But we need some work. We need, health. We need all of the things, the stars to align. And there's no guarantee they're going back. But that's why I keep coming down to it. Like, everyone's talking, well, it could be a big contract for both of them. Might not. Austin Matthews is like, I'm not signing 8. What do you sign, a 4-year extension?
Sign a 4-year deal.
Because he feels the window with Mitch Marner, with William Nylander, especially those two guys that he's riding shotgun with. They're in their prime. They're in their wheelhouse. And Austin's saying, I want to play here as long as I got an opportunity.
And I want control.
Right. And that's what he's doing. So I think Leon will do that. I think Connor will do that. I don't know the term. I don't know anything. But winning can solve everything. But they haven't done it. So you got to see what they're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, he's coming back. Feels like Marner's probably going to return. We know Rantanen's returning. Shesterkin's returning in New York. Sid is the interesting one. Like what Dreg said last hour, like that piqued my interest. This, the idea that maybe Sid or people around Sid are thinking he isn't as sentimental as maybe he's been labeled.
Right.
Like that he has to stay in Pittsburgh his whole career. But the clock is ticking. I mean, he's not a young guy anymore. He's 36 years old. But you look at next year, Tavares will be up, Jamie Benn will be up, Brent Burns will be up.
Jamie Benn's a legacy guy.
Legacy in Dallas. Yeah, Hedman, but Hedman's going to sign an extension. Aaron Ekblad's up a year from now. Like I could see Ekblad possibly working out a deal with Florida, but there were some rumors that he was on the, that maybe he's available.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, Ehlers is up next year. Marchand's up next year. Marchand's going to go back. Brock Besser's up. Like there's some good players who are up a year from now. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, multiple times the rest of this summer, Struddy, just out of nowhere, August 14th, Brock Besser signs extension.
Right.
This guy signs extension. That's probably going to be taking up a lot of our time in the next 2 months.
It will. And just on Sid, it feels like the Penguins are about to go into a fairly significant period of darkness. And should he be a part of that? I think he's the player that should be around winning teams, winning cultures. And they kept pushing, trying to lift that team up. There's always a price to be paid, Noodles. Like at the end of the night, right? Too many China Whites. You got to pay that tab.
Yeah. Yes, you
China Whites. Whew. I don't know. You're right, though. But what if he just decides, like, I've been hanging out. We've missed the playoffs two years in a row. Might miss it again this year. Like, I don't, the pain is too real, and he doesn't see a pathway out, and he has to be ruthless to go, check, please. I want to try and have playoffs and a winning feeling. And what if he's like, I'm not superstitious anymore. I don't need to get paid $8.7 million. I want X amount of dollars. And maybe he takes a discount to go somewhere. Like, I could see Sid, and I know he's a legacy guy, and I think he would want to finish the job there. But is there any chance they finish the job?
No, they're not going to. I mean, that's
no chance.
The sad reality for them is, and I don't shed tears for them. They've won all these Cubs. You know, they won 2 in the 90s. They won 2 in the late 2010s. They won back-to-back 7-8 years ago. You're not getting a third window.
Right.
Like Sid had his first window where they went to back-to-back, and then the second window. You don't get a third window. That's not happening.
The Olympics could be his window. Right?
Realistically, if he's going to stay in Pittsburgh, that's probably your swan song.
Right.
Like if he's committed to retiring in Pittsburgh, they're going to be a non-competitive team, I think, for 3 or 4 years at a minimum.
Right.
So you're 40 at that point. You know, if you're Sid, like,
so it's
Four
Nations Cup and it's Olympics. That's
maybe that's all that matters. He doesn't have to prove anything else.
The other core players on this team are aging, right? Letang, Malkin, Carlson, sitting like none of these guys are young. They're aging together. So it's not like there's a few, like at least Tampa has some younger players that can help and Stamkos leave. So I don't know. I go back and forth on Sid. I'd like to see him continue to be a competitive team, but I just don't see it in Pittsburgh at all.
Well, I'm with you on that, but I think it's up to him to make that call. Because I think if he were to make that call, they would understand it, respect it, and there might be a part of Dubas and company that would actually appreciate it, because then that allows them to go to Gino and Letang and say, guys, we're blowing everything up here.
Yeah. I think if he leaves, the house of cards come down.
Yeah.
That's what
think about, they missed the playoffs this year, and he was phenomenal. Like, where would Pittsburgh have been without Sid this year?
Right.
How many points do they finish with? 78?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Are they a top 5 pick, top 7 pick? I don't know. Maybe not to that extent, but he was a beast, and he's played every single game the last couple of years.
Yeah,
like he's durable, he's playing, and he's putting up numbers. Julian Breezeball, the GM of the Lightning, speaking to the media down there about the Steven Stamkos scenario, said, quote, "I know the fans are disappointed. I know Steven's disappointed, and I'm disappointed," end quote. All right. Well, there you go. Are you? Are you really disappointed? Yeah, you could have kept him if you wanted to.
Well, and he could have signed a deal.
And conversely, he could have signed a short-term deal at smaller money.
If Steven Stamkos is like, we're going to win a cup here again, I'm pumped to bring in Jake Gensel. I will take $4 million a year on a 4-year deal.
He could have done a Bergeron. Bergeron signed the 3-year deal. Like $3 million deal.
Cash is king, guys. You got to be honest. Cash is king. Let's not forget that.
He signed for $32 million in Nash.
And it's like Nashville is Nashville. Like, he's hanging out at Jason Aldean's bar. I think Morgan Wallen just opened a bar there.
Sure. Is he throwing chairs off the roof?
Well, he might. That might be instead of riding the bull like we did at the Saddle Ranch in L.A.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the chair throwing off.
Wallen just throws chairs off the roof.
Exactly.
That could be the play.
That guy can party.
All right, we'll come back with our best bets, brought to you by FanDuel, and wrap up what's been a busy afternoon. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Struddy's had enough. Back to the garage for him. Couldn't even get to 7 p.m. He said, I'm out of here.
Sweat right through his shirt, so he didn't want to be on TV anymore.
I do think he was sweating. I think he had a hair appointment in a few minutes. So, Struddy, it's all good. It's Canada Day. We love seeing Strut.
Exactly.
Best bets brought to you by FanDuel. Not much in terms of action tonight. You got Milwaukee, Colorado. Colorado was terrible. When in doubt, take Milwaukee on the run line. Milwaukee by 1.5 runs tonight. I think they pump the Rockies in Colorado. Your best bets powered by FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Jeff Skinner signing in Edmonton.
That's, you and I were talking off air. I think it's rare, but we saw Corey Perry go there, and that was a unique situation, older. Connor Brown, McDavid's buddy from junior, all of that type of stuff, coming off an injury. This is off a buyout. Skinner choosing a team going, I think, I want to be a part of that. It's not a lot of money, $3 million 1 year, it looks like. So
he can still put up offense. 2 years ago, he had a great bounce back year. This year, he is what he is. Not a big guy.
Right. Speed.
He agitates a little bit too. I don't think the opponents love playing against him.
Yeah, he's
a little bit cheeky, a little bit chirpy.
He's chirpy. I think they're still going to do something with that Ryan McLeod down the middle.
Yeah.
If they end up doing something like that, that might free up something else for maybe another move. But you know what?
I like that play though. It's low risk. If you're Edmonton, bring it in, and you know what you got. You're going to be a really good team, and the expectations are going to be the exact same. You got to go win a Stanley Cup. Go try to get back there. That's the case for, Toronto was very active today. I think Leaf fans are starting to embrace the idea that the core's coming back. The band, it's going to happen. They're likely going to run it back. Maybe it changes. We'll see. But at this point, that's the way I'm leaning. I think most people are.
Yeah.
So you take that with, for what it's worth, and you try to improve on everything else you have. And I think they've done that today. The Tanev deal is a long-term deal, but I really like him.
Yeah.
Ekman-Larsson had a resurgence, and he's 32. You have this vibe about him that he's 40, 41. He's not.
Yeah, he's not.
And Stolarz hasn't played a ton. Big guy. His stats were great this year in Florida when he did play.
Every move they made, including the Hakanpää, who's a mutant, every move they made was efficient in what they believed for, the AAV.
Right.
Years you can argue about, but
the money wasn't crazy.
The team is better today than it was this morning, yesterday.
Absolutely.
And that's all you could do.
And they're going to do more.
Yeah.
There's going to be more. There's going to be trades. All that kind of stuff is coming with the Leafs.
I agree.
All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it, as always. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web, we appreciate that. Happy Canada Day. It's been a blast. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.